The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hum of the wind against the broken glass. Ethan stood in the ruins of his childhood home, his breath trembling as the shadows clung to the walls. He whispered, "Why did it all end like this?" The scent of smoke lingered, faint yet sharp, as though the house itself still mourned. His hands grazed the edges of old photographs scattered on the floor, torn reminders of what once was. The world felt hollow, and within that void, his soul echoed back to him. He closed his eyes, seeing flashes of laughter, then screams, then emptiness. His heart pounded like a drum of sorrow, each beat dragging him deeper into despair. He whispered again, this time softer, "I can't escape it." The truth hung over him like an invisible chain, binding him to the past he could never bury. In that moment, Ethan felt himself unravel, as though every memory was a shard cutting through his chest. He fell to his knees, clutching the fragments, the room spinning with ghosts of yesterday. The walls whispered memories Ethan wished he could erase. He traced the outline of an old photograph, his voice breaking as he muttered, "They're gone, all gone." Shadows danced across the room like echoes of laughter turned hollow. His mind replayed the night it all ended, the fire, the screaming, the unbearable silence that followed. Every crack in the walls seemed to bleed with reminders of what was stolen. Ethan sank into the dust, clutching the frame tighter until his knuckles burned white. He closed his eyes, picturing their faces smiling, only for the images to dissolve into smoke. His heart screamed inside his chest, but no sound escaped his lips. Ethan lifted his head, his eyes finding the ceiling, where smoke stains lingered like scars. He whispered, "I should have been there." Guilt coiled tightly in his chest, suffocating him. His body trembled as he pressed his palms to his face, wishing the darkness would swallow him whole. Each inhale was ragged, each exhale heavier, as though the air itself resisted him. His voice cracked, "Why wasn't it me instead?" The words shattered into the silence, returning to him like cruel reminders. For the first time, his resolve faltered entirely, and despair surged unrelenting. The old clock on the wall ticked faintly, though the hands no longer moved. Ethan stared at it blankly, his chest hollow. "Time stopped the moment they left," he whispered. Dust clung to every surface, smothering the life from the room. His pulse raced as he walked slowly toward the broken window, staring out into the empty night. The world beyond seemed just as ruined as the one within. His breath caught when he saw the faint reflection of himself in the shattered glass, a stranger, hollow-eyed and broken. Ethan turned from the window and sank back into the corner, hurling into himself. "I don't know how to go on," he whispered. His voice carried the weight of surrender, a man crushed under the weight of memory. The silence pressed harder, as if the house conspired to keep him trapped within its grief. He clutched his knees, rocking faintly, the room closing in around him. His body shook, fragile against the crushing emptiness. Hope felt foreign, like a language he could no longer speak. His final whisper barely escaped, "I'm lost." The morning light crept into the broken home, revealing the dust that floated like ash in the air. Ethan sat still, his head buried in his hands, when a knock echoed faintly at the door. His breath hitched. He whispered, "Who would come here now?" Slowly he rose, every step heavy, dragging his feet across the warped floorboards. His hand hovered at the door handle, shaking, uncertain if he even wanted to open it. The knock came again, firmer this time, cutting through the silence that had held him hostage. His chest tightened as he pulled it open. Standing there was Claire, her eyes full of sorrow and strength. She said softly, "You shouldn't be alone in this." Her words pierced him deeper than the silence had, stirring the fragile shards of his heart. Claire stepped inside, her boots crunching softly against broken glass. She looked around at the ruined walls, her face shadowed with grief. Ethan muttered, "It's nothing but ashes now." She turned toward him, her eyes brimming with empathy. "It's not nothing," she said gently. "It's a memory, and memories still breathe, even in ruins." Ethan felt his throat tighten as he met her gaze. He wanted to scream, to tell her she couldn't understand, but her presence quieted him. She reached out, resting a hand lightly on his arm, and in that touch he felt both unbearable comfort and piercing pain. Ethan pulled away, turning his back on her. "I can't live inside these memories," he said sharply. His voice cracked under the weight of unshed tears. Claire didn't flinch, her tone steady as she replied, "You can't erase them either." The silence that followed stretched long, heavy with truths neither wanted to face. Ethan pressed his palm against the wall, his head bowed low. Claire's voice softened. "You're not the only one who lost something here." The words stung, reminding him that grief wasn't his alone. For the first time, he wondered what pain she carried. The silence cracked as Claire stepped closer. She whispered, "I come here too, you know. Not to suffer, but to remember them." Ethan's body stiffened, his breath caught between guilt and longing. He turned slowly, eyes red and hollow. "Remembering doesn't bring them back," he spat, though the words carried more despair than anger. Claire nodded, her lips trembling, but her gaze unbroken. "No, but forgetting kills them twice," she said softly. Ethan stared at her, the truth digging into him, fragile and unrelenting. Ethan slumped into a chair, its legs groaning against the cracked floor. His voice was low, almost defeated. "I don't know how to keep going." Claire crouched beside him, her eyes level with his. "One step at a time," she said gently. He shook his head, his hand covering his face. "Every step feels heavier than the last." She reached out, clasping his hand firmly, her touch anchoring him. For the first time, Ethan didn't pull away. The weight of her presence pressed against the void within him, and in that moment he felt the faintest flicker of something that resembled hope. The night returned with a weight heavier than before, and Ethan felt the silence pressing in once more. He wandered the streets alone, the ruined house shrinking behind him. His thoughts spiraled as he muttered, "It follows me everywhere." The air was cold, carrying with it the scent of rain-soaked pavement. His footsteps echoed on the empty road, each step dragging the memory of what he couldn't escape. A figure appeared at the edge of the street, leaning against a lamppost, their posture sharp and deliberate. Ethan froze, his chest tightening. The stranger's voice cut through the night like a blade. "You think running will save you?" Ethan's heart raced as the shadow of his pain now stood before him, alive and taunting. Ethan's voice wavered as he said, "Who are you?" The figure stepped into the light, his smirk fading into something darker. "I'm what you're trying to bury," Marcus replied, his tone sharp, almost cruel. Ethan's stomach churned, the truth gnawing at him. He stumbled back, his eyes darting, but Marcus advanced steadily, each step deliberate, heavy with purpose. "You think forgetting makes you stronger?" Marcus sneered. "It only makes you weaker." Ethan clenched his fists, but his body betrayed him, trembling with fear he couldn't contain. The street felt narrower, the night suffocating as Marcus's presence grew larger than life. Marcus stopped just feet away, his eyes burning into Ethan's soul. "You left them," he said, each word venomous. Ethan's chest tightened as he snapped back. "You don't know what happened." Marcus tilted his head, a cruel smile returning. "I know enough. You were too weak to save them." Ethan staggered, his breath ragged, the accusation tearing him apart. He shouted, "I tried!" His voice cracked with desperation. Marcus's laughter was low, mocking, echoing in the emptiness of the night. Ethan felt his knees weaken, as though every ounce of strength had been stolen from him. Ethan collapsed to his knees, the weight of Marcus's words crushing him. His hands dug into the wet pavement, knuckles scraping raw. "I couldn't save them," he whispered broken. Marcus crouched beside him, his voice low and venomous. "You didn't want to," he hissed. Ethan's eyes widened in horror at the words, the thought slashing deeper than any blade. "That's not true," Ethan screamed, his voice echoing against the empty street. Marcus's expression hardened, his face twisting with rage. "You keep lying to yourself," he growled. The truth and lies blurred together in Ethan's head, threatening to tear him apart. Ethan forced himself back to his feet, his body trembling, but his eyes beginning to burn with defiance. "You're nothing but a shadow," he said, his voice quivering yet fierce. Marcus stood tall, his jaw tightening, fists curling. "A shadow that owns you," he retorted. The tension between them thickened, the silence brimming with the promise of violence. Ethan's heart pounded as he steadied his breath, his fear battling against a spark of strength. For the first time, he stared Marcus down without looking away. "Not anymore," he whispered. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of a man who refused to break. The night bled into dawn, but Ethan felt no light within himself. He walked aimlessly through the ruined streets, Marcus's words replaying in his mind like poison, dripping slowly into his veins. Every step felt heavier, every breath a battle. He muttered to himself, "I'm not the man he says I am." Yet doubt gnawed deeper with each heartbeat. Claire found him sitting on a collapsed wall, his shoulders hunched in defeat. She placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Don't let him decide who you are." Ethan turned toward her, eyes hollow, voice shaking. "What if he's right?" She shook her head, her expression fierce but tender. "He's your shadow, not your truth." Ethan's chest tightened as Claire's words lingered. He said weakly, "But I can't escape him." Claire crouched in front of him, her eyes unwavering. "You don't escape shadows," she said gently. "You face them." Ethan stared at her, his breath faltering. Her certainty both terrified and comforted him. "I don't have the strength," he admitted. Claire clasped his trembling hands tightly. "Strength isn't something you find alone. Let us stand with you." Ethan swallowed hard, tears rising. For the first time, he allowed her words to sink in, like faint light cutting through fog. Later that morning, Ethan and Claire entered the small chapel at the edge of town. Its windows cracked, its pews covered in dust. The mentor, Father Gabriel, stood near the altar, his face aged with wisdom and sorrow. "You carry a heavy burden, Ethan," Gabriel said softly. Ethan bowed his head, whispering, "I can't carry it anymore." Gabriel placed a hand on his shoulder. "The pain you feel is real, but it does not own you. It is the weight that can teach you who you are." Ethan's lips trembled. "What if I fail again?" Gabriel's eyes shone with calm. "Then you rise again." As Gabriel's words echoed, Ethan felt the walls inside him crack. But Marcus's voice still rang in his mind, sharp and venomous. He gripped the edge of the pew, knuckles white. "I can hear him even now," Ethan said shakily. Claire leaned close. "Then speak louder than he does." Gabriel nodded. "Confront the voice, Ethan. Don't let it fester in silence." Ethan closed his eyes, his breath unsteady, his fists trembling. For the first time he whispered firmly, "You don't own me." His words broke into the air, fragile but undeniable, like a spark flickering in the darkness. Ethan staggered outside the chapel, the morning sun harsh against his fragile eyes. Marcus was waiting across the courtyard, leaning against a broken stone pillar, his smirk returning. Ethan froze, his pulse thundering. Claire gripped his arm, but he shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered, "this is mine." Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting the silence. "So you've found courage in sermons?" Ethan steadied his breath, fear clawing inside him but not owning him. "No," he replied, voice stronger, "I found it in myself." The battle lines were drawn, and the breaking point had arrived. The courtyard fell silent, broken only by the rustle of wind. Marcus's gaze pierced Ethan. "Do you want to know why you can't escape me?" he asked with venom. Ethan's throat tightened, but he held steady. "Tell me," he demanded. Marcus stepped closer, his eyes burning. "Because I am you." The words slammed into Ethan like a storm. His breath vanished, his chest collapsing under the weight of truth. Claire gasped, shaking her head in disbelief. Ethan's mind spiraled. He whispered, "No, you can't be." Marcus grinned cruelly. "I am the part you buried. I am your guilt, your failure, your shadow." Ethan staggered, the revelation shattering the fragile walls he had built. Ethan stumbled back, his breath ragged, the words echoing through his soul. "You're not real," he whispered desperately. Marcus stepped forward, his presence suffocating. "I'm as real as the pain you carry." Ethan shook his head violently, but his knees weakened. Claire rushed to his side, gripping his arm. "Don't listen," she urged. Ethan's voice cracked. "How do I fight something that's me?" Marcus's laugh was bitter, sharp. "You can't, you only break further." Ethan's tears finally spilled, his body trembling as he felt the war between truth and denial raging inside him. The ground beneath Ethan felt unsteady as Marcus's words coiled tighter. "Every failure, every scream, every moment you turned away. It was me," Marcus growled. Ethan clutched his chest, gasping for air. Claire cried out, "You are not him, you're more than this." Ethan stared at her, torn, his voice shaking. "What if I'm not?" His body bent under the weight of doubt. Gabriel stepped into the courtyard, his voice calm but firm. "Ethan, shadows are not your truth. They exist only when you let the light fall away." Marcus snarled, his rage growing. Ethan's eyes flickered between them, torn between collapse and awakening. Ethan's breath steadied as Gabriel's words took root. He lifted his head, locking eyes with Marcus. "You're not all of me," he said, his voice trembling but clear. Marcus's face twisted in rage. "Without me, you are nothing." Ethan stepped forward, his hands shaking, but his eyes burning brighter. "Without you, I'm free." The air between them crackled, the tension unbearable. Marcus lunged, but Ethan didn't flinch this time. Instead, he stood tall, his shadow no longer cowering under Marcus's. Claire whispered, "You can do this," her voice filled with desperate hope. Marcus roared, his voice echoing like thunder, but Ethan's gaze did not waver. For the first time, he saw Marcus not as invincible, but as a fractured reflection of himself. Ethan whispered, "You're not my end." His words carried the weight of release, the chains cracking in his chest. Marcus faltered, his expression breaking as shadows rippled around him. Gabriel's voice rang out, calm and resolute. "The shadow fades when the man embraces his light." Ethan stepped forward, his posture strong, his voice steady. "I accept my scars. I accept myself." Marcus screamed one final time before his form began to dissolve into the air, vanishing like smoke into sunlight. The courtyard grew eerily still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan stood motionless, his chest heaving as the last wisps of Marcus's form lingered in the air. Yet deep inside, the shadow's echo still pulsed, reminding him of battles yet unfinished. His eyes flickered with fear, but also with defiance. Claire stepped closer, whispering, "This is your moment." Ethan closed his eyes, listening not to Marcus but to his own trembling heartbeat. He whispered, "If I falter now, I lose everything." Gabriel's calm voice carried through the silence, "Then do not falter, choose." Ethan opened his eyes, and in them burned the fragile flame of resolve. Suddenly, the air shifted, and Marcus's voice roared once more. Though his form was gone, the courtyard darkened unnaturally, shadows crawling up the walls. Ethan gasped, clutching his chest as pain lanced through him. "He's not gone," he cried. Claire reached for him, but Gabriel raised his hand, his expression steady. "This is not him, Ethan. It is you resisting yourself." Ethan fell to one knee, his breath ragged, whispering, I can't hold it." Claire knelt beside him, tears streaming. "Yes, you can. You're not alone." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling both pain and strength warring inside him, his body trembling with the weight of choice. The darkness pressed harder, whispering Marcus's cruel words. Ethan gritted his teeth, shouting, "You don't define me." His voice echoed against the stone walls, shattering the suffocating silence. Claire cried out, "That's it, keep going." Gabriel's voice followed like thunder, "Claim your truth, Ethan." He staggered to his feet, shaking violently, his body threatening collapse. His fists clenched, his chest heaved, but his voice rang strong. I accept the scars. I accept the pain. But they will not own me. The air seemed to split, the shadows recoiling like beaten dogs, the weight of the void slowly lifting. As Ethan's voice grew louder, the courtyard shook as if the earth itself responded to Ethan's cry. The shadows screamed, writhing violently, before collapsing inward toward him. His breath faltered, but he held firm, whispering, "I'm stronger than you." Marcus's voice returned in a final guttural roar. "Without me, you are nothing." Ethan's body glowed faintly in the sun's light, his eyes steady. He whispered one last time, "Without you, I am free." With that, the shadows split apart, dissolving into air. The courtyard fell still. The storm was broken. Ethan stood trembling, but standing nonetheless, his scars visible, his soul unchained. Silence blanketed the courtyard, broken only by Ethan's uneven breathing. He turned toward Claire, his face wet with tears, but his eyes alive for the first time in years. She reached for him, whispering, "You did it." Gabriel stepped closer, placing a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. "The shadow is gone," he said softly. Ethan shook his head. "No, it's a part of me, but it no longer rules me." His words carried calm finality, the voice of a man reborn. The sun shone brighter, warming his broken spirit. For the first time, Ethan felt not crushed by the past, but transformed by it. Ethan stepped beyond the courtyard gates, each step deliberate, each breath steadier than the last. The morning sun stretched across the ruins, draping them in soft gold. His heart, once heavy, now beat with fragile strength. Claire walked at his side, her silence steady, her presence grounding him like the earth beneath his feet. He whispered, "I thought I would never feel this light again." She glanced at him, her eyes warm, and replied gently, "You fought for it, Ethan. You earned it." His chest ached, but it no longer crushed him. For the first time, pain and peace lived together inside him, not as enemies but as partners. He placed a hand on the scar, etched across his palm, whispering, "I carry them with me, not as chains, but as truth." The gates closed behind them, sealing the void in the past, while the path before him stretched wide, filled with possibility. The path led them through meadows reclaiming stone, where wildflowers grew between cracks of forgotten walls. Ethan slowed his pace, reaching out to brush his hand across blades of grass glistening with dew. "The world kept moving while I stayed frozen," he murmured, his voice tinged with awe rather than regret. Claire smiled faintly. "The world waited for you too. It always does for those who choose to rise." Ethan paused, staring at the tiny bloom of a violet peeking through rubble. He knelt, fingertips grazing its petals. "Even in ruin, something finds a way," he whispered. Claire's eyes softened. "So do you." For the first time, he allowed himself a laugh, light and unforced, though his eyes still shimmered with tears. That laugh carried through the field like an offering to the silence that had once owned him. They climbed the hill, the sky unfolding wider with every step. At its crest, the ruined village lay beneath them, bathed in gold, softened by mist. Ethan stood motionless, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I thought my story ended in darkness," he said, his voice quiet yet firm. Claire stepped beside him, her hand sliding gently into his. "Darkness is only the canvas," she replied softly. "You chose to paint over it with light." His throat tightened as gratitude swelled inside him. He whispered, "I am afraid to lose this peace." Claire's grip tightened. "Peace is not something you keep," she said. "It is something you become." Ethan turned to her, tears glistening, and nodded. The wind carried their silence forward, no longer hollow but whole. The wind swept across the hill, stirring strands of Claire's auburn hair. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the warmth of sunlight bathe his scarred face. He whispered, "I forgive you," words carried not to her but to himself, and to the shadow that had haunted him. His body eased, A tremor releasing like a burden finally set down. Claire leaned gently against his shoulder, smiling softly. She whispered, "Forgiveness is the door you never thought you could open, yet it was always yours to hold." Ethan's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, his heart no longer at war. In his mind, Gabriel's voice echoed, "Healing is not forgetting but becoming." He opened his eyes, and for the first time, the world did not look broken. It looked whole. His scars no longer hid in shame, but glowed with the strength of survival. The hilltops stretched endlessly beneath the rising sun, silence holding them in its eternal embrace. Ethan turned to Claire, his voice steady yet tender. "Thank you for not letting me fall." She shook her head, her eyes glistening. "You stood because you chose to," she whispered. Ethan looked back at the horizon, his lips curving into a quiet smile. The silence between them no longer felt empty but alive, filled with presence and peace. His eyes shimmered with tears, but they were no longer born of sorrow. They were the tears of a soul rediscovered. He whispered into the wind, "I am no longer lost." The words carried across the valley, rising with the sun. The ruins below seemed softened, not reminders of tragedy but symbols of survival. The light stretched endlessly, wrapping the world in gold, as if honoring his rebirth.